But first, I want to talk about a story from Britain that will leave you shaking your head. Children as young as 8 being taught that boys can have their periods. Seriously. We learned this week that a city council in Britain has issued guidelines to teachers requiring them to tell children that boys can menstruate, as well as urging schools to provide sanitary disposal bins in both boys' and girls' toilets. The Brighton and Hove City Council guidelines state, and I quote, "Trans boys and men and non-binary people may have periods, and that menstruation must be inclusive of all genders." It's all part of a gender-inclusive push in the UK that is evident from biological men who identify as women being sent to female prisons to campaigns to rename feminine hygiene aisles in supermarkets. In many ways, the UK has become an example of what to avoid if you want to create a healthy and cohesive society free of the excesses and ills of PC culture. In recent years, we've learnt of the shameful grooming gang scandal that saw thousands of vulnerable girls abused and raped by men who operated with impunity because authorities were too concerned about cultural sensibilities to make arrests. There is the growing knife crime that in February and March saw London's murder rate overtake New York's. Meanwhile, the police in the UK are devoting significant resources to policing hurtful online posts that include new age offences like dead naming and misgendering. You may laugh at such outlandish nonsense, but educators being instructed to tell children that boys can have periods is no laughing matter. And it's naive to think we don't have people within our own education system with similar ideas. For this special Christmas edition of The Friday Show is Director of Policy at the Institute of Public Affairs, Gideon Rosner, and leading child psychologist, Michael Carr-Gregg. Welcome, gentlemen. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Rita.
Well, when I say special Christmas edition, it's going to be like every other show, but it's almost Christmas, so we'll go with that. Now, my editorial today was on the absurd situation in the UK where we've got a council advising educators to tell boys as young as 8 or children as young as 8 that boys can have their periods. Now, Michael, when girls are going through that difficult period, it can be quite a sensitive time, a difficult time, your body's changing. Do they really need to be coping with all this gender-inclusive business as well? Instead of just being told what's happening to their bodies?
Categorically not. If you actually look at the statistics, 1 in 7 of these kids in Australia have a mental health problem. Just think about that for a second. 1 in 7 have a DSM-5 classification, anxiety, depression. So clearly they're not coping as it is. Lumping this stuff on top of them is ridiculous. Fascinatingly, we now know that some boys actually do have earlier hormonal surges at 8 years of age. It's called adrenarche. Most people don't know about this. And we know that it's associated with greater psychological problems and behavioural problems. So to lump this on top of that, crazy stuff.
It is. And this UK push for what they call gender inclusiveness, it really is actually splitting now the feminist movement because there's women coming out and saying this isn't good for us to have people who are those who were born male but now identify as female playing professional sports or being sent to female prisons or being in women's shelters. That's actually not a good net gain for womanhood.
No.
And it is splitting the feminist movement, which I've found fascinating.
It is splitting the feminist movement, and it's not good for women, but more to the point, it's actually not good for transgender people, this kind of silliness. Whether it's saying that boys can have periods or scrubbing birth certificates out of, gender out of birth certificates, this is not about genuinely supporting transgender people or being genuinely welcoming of transgender people. This is about the radical Marxist notion that gender is some sort of patriarchal oppression, that gender norms as we know them are inherently oppressive, and that gender is a social construct. To infuse genuine transgender issues with this kind of postmodern silliness, I actually think demeans people who genuinely do transition, who do struggle with their gender, who do feel that they were born in the wrong body. And I have friends who are transitioning or have transitioned. It's actually an insult to them to reduce their experience to this kind of utter postmodern foolishness.
And it's just, again, creating all sorts of unnecessary angst when none needs to exist, because I think most Australians and people in Britain would be very supportive of people who want to go through that transition and are polite and use the appropriate pronouns and the new name, and that's just a matter of politeness as far as I'm concerned. You just do that for the sake of someone's feelings. But to try to bring it to educating 8-year-olds, I think puts people offside, and you don't want that.
I just want to support what you've said. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but about 20 years ago, 50% of transgender people actually attempted to take their own lives. So they were under enormous stress back then. Just when we've begun to actually make their experience a little bit more easy, we've got this stuff. So
yeah, it's been hijacked, and it's a great shame.
It is, and I mean, it's almost so farcical that you can just laugh and dismiss it. But when it's being taught to children, you've got to take it seriously. But it did remind me, I've got to say, this scene from Life of Brian. You're probably too young for Life of Brian.
I've seen the clip.
You've seen. Well, let's have a look, because this is now, was once high farce, is now reality.
I want to have babies.
You want to have babies?
It's every man's right to have babies if he wants them.
But you can't have babies.
Don't you oppress me.
I'm not oppressing you, Stan. You haven't got a womb. Where's the fetus going to gestate? You're going to keep it in a box?
You're going to keep it in a box? Love it.
When I saw that clip, and this is before you wrote your article, I thought, my God, somebody sent it me as a funny clip. I thought, they have traced the arc of gender theory for 50 years, these people. It was prophetic.
It is. You would have thought we'd be living in the Life of Brian.